The first thing anyone noticed was how quiet the morning was. Not peaceful quiet. Not the kind that comes with wind through trees or distant machinery humming somewhere beyond the horizon. This was the kind of quiet that felt wrong, like the world had forgotten to make sound. Lena paused mid-sentence, her fingers still resting on the page of the book in her lap. And the little fox looked up at the sky and said, "One day, I'll touch the sun." She stopped. 20 small faces stared back at her from the floor, legs crossed, eyes wide, waiting for the ending they had already heard a dozen times but still loved just the same. "Miss Lena?" one of them whispered. She didn't answer. Her gaze had shifted past them, past the soft glow of the classroom lights, toward the wide glass windows that looked out over the valley. The sky was wrong. It wasn't blue anymore. It burned. A deep, violent orange stretched across the clouds, streaked with lines of black that cut downward in perfect, unnatural paths. At first glance, they could have been falling stars. They weren't. They were too straight, too controlled, too many. The ground trembled. Not enough to knock anything over, just enough to make the glass hum faintly in its frame. Somewhere in the distance, something cracked, loud, sharp, final. One of the younger children began to cry. Another followed. "Miss Lena?" A small hand grabbed onto her sleeve. She blinked. Just once. And when she looked back down at them, her face had changed. The fear was still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. But it was buried. Hidden behind something stronger. Something they wouldn't recognize until much later in their lives. She closed the book gently, pressing it shut with both hands like it mattered more than anything else in the room. "All right," she said softly. Her voice was steady. Exactly the same as it had been before the sky caught fire. "New game." The children sniffled, confused but listening. "We're going to play the quiet game," she continued. "You remember the rules?" A few nods. A few shaky breaths. Everyone stays close. No talking. No running. We go together. Another tremor rolled through the ground, stronger this time. The lights flickered once. She smiled. Not because she felt like it. Because they needed her to. "And we don't stop until I say we win." That got a few more nods. A few more hands reaching for each other. She stood, smoothing her clothes out of habit more than necessity, and moved toward the door. The first explosion hit before she reached it. It came from somewhere beyond the hills, a distant bloom of sound that arrived a second too late to match the flash that followed. The windows rattled violently now, a sharp crack splintering across one corner. Screams filled the room. Lena turned immediately, dropping to one knee. "Eyes on me," she said, louder now but still controlled. "Eyes on me, not the windows." They obeyed. Not perfectly. Not all of them. But enough. It was enough. "Good," she whispered. "That's it. Stay with me." Another flash. Closer. The orange sky split open as something massive tore through the clouds, its shape jagged and wrong, like a blade forced into a place it didn't belong. More followed behind it, dozens of them, descending in silence that made the explosions feel distant and unreal. The building shook harder now. Dust fell from the ceiling in fine, drifting lines. Somewhere in the hallway outside, an alarm began to scream. Lena moved quickly. "Up," she said, clapping once. "All of you, line up like we practiced." They stumbled to their feet, some crying openly now, others biting their lips hard enough to hurt. She counted them automatically. 1, 2, 3. Her voice didn't falter. 21, 22. The pause. Her chest tightened. 23. All of them. Still here. "Good," she said again, softer now. "We're winning." She opened the classroom door. The hallway beyond was chaos. Teachers shouting. Children running. The distant, rhythmic thud of something heavy striking the ground over and over again. Lena stepped into it anyway. She positioned herself at the front of the line, one hand extended behind her so the first child could hold on. "Stay with me," she said. And then she started walking. Not running. Walking. Because if she ran, they would run. And if they ran, they would fall apart. Another impact shook the building. Closer. Too close. The lights died. For a brief second, everything went dark. In that darkness, the sound came. Not an explosion. Not a crash. Something else. A deep, tearing noise, like metal being bent open by something that didn't care how strong it was supposed to be. The children froze. So did everyone else. Even the alarms seemed to falter for a moment, their wail dipping into something uncertain. Lena felt it then. That shift. That invisible, undeniable moment when everything changes and nothing will ever go back to the way it was. She tightened her grip on the small hand behind her. "It's okay," she whispered. It wasn't. But she said it anyway. Because that was her job. Another sound echoed through the halls. Heavy. Measured. Not running. Walking. Getting closer. One step at a time. Lena didn't turn around. She didn't need to. Some part of her already knew. The quiet hadn't been empty. It had been waiting. And whatever had been falling from that burning sky had just arrived. The first soldier didn't rush. That was what made it worse. The hallway doors at the far end didn't explode inward or shatter apart. They opened slowly, deliberately, as if whatever stood behind them had all the time in the world. The screaming stopped. Not because people felt safe. Because something deeper than fear had taken hold. Something that told every living thing in that hallway the same truth at the same time. Run, and it won't matter. The figure stepped inside. It was taller than any human in the building, its body wrapped in dark armor that seemed less like metal and more like something grown. Its surface shifted faintly, like it was breathing. 4 narrow eyes glowed from within a smooth, featureless helmet, each one moving independently, scanning. It did not look confused. It did not hesitate. It simply observed. Another stepped in behind it. Then another. Within seconds, the hallway was no longer theirs. Lena felt the children press closer behind her, small hands gripping her shirt, her arm, each other. She didn't move. Couldn't. Her mind was trying to catch up, trying to find something, anything, that made sense. There was none. One of the other teachers broke first. "Everyone run," he shouted, grabbing 2 children and pulling them toward the opposite end of the hall. He didn't make it 3 steps. A flash of blue light. No sound. He dropped instantly, his body hitting the floor with a dull, final thud. The children he had been holding crumpled beside him, unmoving. The silence that followed was absolute. No one screamed. No one moved. Because now they understood. The soldiers advanced. Not quickly. Not slowly. Just forward. Like gravity. Like something inevitable. One of them tilted its head slightly, as if focusing on Lena's group. A faint pulse of light flickered across its armor, and for a brief moment, something like sound filled the air, distorted, mechanical, almost like language trying to form and failing. Then it spoke. Not with a voice. With translation. Population secured. The words were flat. Meaningless. As if they were describing objects. Not people. Lena swallowed. Her throat felt dry, tight, useless. "There are children here," she said. Her voice sounded small, even to her own ears. But she didn't stop. "They're young. They're not." The nearest soldier moved. Not fast enough to blur. Not slow enough to react. Just enough. It reached her. A single motion. And she was no longer standing. The wall hit her hard, knocking the air from her lungs as her vision exploded into white. She slid down, barely catching herself before hitting the floor completely. The world tilted. Sound came back all at once. Crying. Screaming. The sharp, panicked breathing of 23 children who had just watched the only thing standing between them and the unknown disappear in a single effortless movement. Lena forced herself up. Every part of her body screamed at her to stay down. She didn't listen. She couldn't. They were already moving past her. The soldiers reached the line of children and began pulling them apart. Not violently. Not cruelly. Efficiently. One child at a time. Lifted. Carried. Like they weighed nothing. Like they mattered even less. No. Lena staggered forward, grabbing onto the nearest arm she could reach. "Stop, please, they don't understand." The soldier didn't even look at her. It simply continued walking, dragging the child from her grip without resistance. The child screamed. Miss Lena! That broke something. Not in the soldiers. In her. She moved again, faster this time, throwing herself between them and the rest of the children. You're not taking them, she said. Her voice shook now. Her body trembled. But she stood anyway. You can't. Another flash. This one didn't hit her. It hit the ground at her feet. Close enough. A warning. The message was clear. You are not a factor. She froze. Not because she wanted to. Because for the first time since this began, her body refused to move. Behind her, small hands clung tighter. Miss Lena. She closed her eyes for half a second. Just one. And when she opened them again, something had changed. She stepped aside. Not in surrender. In choice. Because she understood something now. She couldn't stop this. Not here. Not like this. But she could do one thing. She could stay. The soldiers continued their work. Children were gathered, lifted, carried out into the burning light beyond the broken doors. Some fought. Most didn't. Most were too young to understand what fighting even meant. Lena followed. Not resisting. Not running. Just staying close. Every step. Every child. She counted. Silently. Desperately. Because numbers were the only thing she had left that still felt real. Outside, the world was gone. The sky was filled with descending ships, their shapes cutting through the orange haze like teeth. Buildings burned in scattered clusters across the valley, smoke rising in thick, choking columns. People were everywhere. On the ground. Being dragged. Being herded. Being loaded into long, open transports that hovered just above the surface. No one was in control. Except them. The soldiers moved through it all with the same calm precision, unaffected by the chaos around them. Lena saw other groups of children. Not just hers. Dozens. Some from the lower classrooms. Some she recognized from the nearby housing blocks. All being collected the same way. Lifted. A transport door opened with a low mechanical hiss. The children were loaded inside. One by one. No names. No hesitation. Just placement. Lena climbed in after them. No one stopped her. No one cared. Inside, the air was cold. Metal walls. No windows. Just a dim strip of light running along the ceiling. The children huddled together immediately, instinctively, forming a tight cluster in the center of the space. Some cried openly now. Some sat in silence, eyes wide and unblinking. Lena moved to them, dropping to her knees. Hey, she whispered, pulling the nearest ones close. Hey, look at me. A few did. Not all. That was okay. She gathered as many as she could reach, wrapping her arms around them, pulling them into something that felt like safety even if it wasn't. I'm here, she said. Over and over. I'm right here. The transport lifted. They felt it more than heard it, a low hum vibrating through the floor as the ground disappeared beneath them. Someone asked the question. A small voice. Barely audible. Where are we going? Lena didn't answer right away. Because she didn't know. And for a moment, she didn't know what to say. Then she took a breath. And did the only thing she could. Once upon a time, she said softly, there was a little fox who wanted to touch the sun. A few of them looked up. A few leaned closer. Tiny hands gripping her sleeves again. Holding on. Outside, the ships climbed higher, leaving behind a burning world that grew smaller with every passing second. Inside, Lena kept her voice steady. She told the story, even as her heart broke. Even as the reality of what had just happened began to settle in. Because the truth was already there, sitting cold and heavy in her chest. They hadn't been attacked. They hadn't been defeated. They had been taken. And somewhere, far above the clouds and the fire and the smoke, someone had decided that was allowed. Phase 3. The first night, none of them slept. Not really. They drifted in and out of something close to it, exhaustion pulling them under for minutes at a time before fear dragged them back up again. Every unfamiliar sound made them flinch. Every shift in the ship's movement tightened their grip on each other. Lena didn't close her eyes once. She sat with her back against the cold metal wall, the smallest children gathered in her lap, The older ones pressed shoulder to shoulder around her like a fragile shield. She kept counting. Not out loud. Never out loud. But her mind moved through them again and again. 1, 2, 3. Every breath. Every shift. Every quiet whimper in the dark. 23. Still here. That mattered. It had to matter. The transport was one of many. She had realized that quickly. Through the small gaps near the ceiling, where dim light filtered in from somewhere beyond, she caught glimpses of movement. Other compartments, other groups, more people packed into spaces just like this one. Not just from the school. From everywhere. The realization settled slowly. Heavily. This wasn't chaos. This was organized. Planned. They weren't just taking. They were collecting. The children noticed it too, in their own way. "Are there more?" one of the older boys whispered. Lena nodded. "Yes." "From the other classes?" "Yes." He swallowed, looking down at his hands. "They took everyone." It wasn't a question. She didn't answer. Because she couldn't lie. And she wouldn't break in front of them. So instead, she shifted slightly, adjusting the small girl sleeping against her shoulder, and said something else. "Then we're not alone." That helped. A little. Not much. But enough. Time passed differently in the dark. Minutes stretched. Hours blurred. Eventually, the crying softened into quiet sniffles, then into silence. Not because they felt safe. Because they were too tired to be afraid the same way anymore. That was when Lena changed what she was doing. She stopped just holding them. She started giving them something to hold on to. "All right," she whispered, just loud enough for the ones closest to hear. "New rule." A few heads lifted. Slowly. "We're going to keep track of each other." No one spoke. But they were listening. "The older ones," she continued, her eyes moving across the group, finding the ones who were still awake, still aware. "You're my helpers now." The pause. Uncertainty. Then a girl near the edge of the group nodded. "I can help." Another voice followed. "Me too." Lena smiled. There was that small, fragile shift. "Good," she said softly. "I need you." She pointed gently, assigning without pressure. "You stay near the door. Make sure no one goes too close. You stay with the little ones. If they wake up scared, you wake me. And you," she hesitated for just a second, then met the eyes of a boy who hadn't said a word since they were taken. "You count with me." He blinked. Surprised. "Count?" She nodded. "Every time we stop moving. Every time the lights change. Every time something feels different." A long pause. Then quietly, "Okay." That was all it took. Not strength. Not bravery. Just something to do. Something that meant they weren't completely powerless. The ship shuddered. A low, heavy vibration rolled through the floor, different from before. Slower. Deeper. They were arriving somewhere. The children felt it instantly. The tension snapped back into place. "What's happening?" someone whispered. Lena didn't answer. She was listening. The hum of the engines shifted pitch. There was a distant sound, metal against metal, something large locking into place. Then silence. Real silence. The kind that comes right before something begins. The door opened. This time, it wasn't slow. It snapped upward with a sharp mechanical hiss, flooding the compartment with harsh white light that made every child flinch and turn away. Figures stood beyond it. The same ones. Waiting. One stepped forward, its presence filling the doorway. "Disembark." The word echoed strangely, layered with something artificial. Lena stood first. Her legs protested. Her body screamed. She ignored it. "Stay close," she whispered. Always the same words. Always the same tone. The children moved with her. Not because they weren't afraid. Because she was moving. And that was enough. They stepped out into a space that didn't feel real. A massive interior chamber stretched out before them, walls rising higher than any building they had ever seen. The air was colder here, thinner somehow, carrying a faint metallic scent that burned the back of the throat. Lines. There were lines everywhere. Groups of people being moved, sorted, directed by more of the same armored figures. No shouting. No chaos. Just order. Cold. Efficient. Lena's grip tightened on the nearest hand. She counted again. Quickly. 23. Still here. They were directed toward one side of the chamber. Separated. Not violently. Not suddenly. Just divided. Adults pulled one way. Children another. Lena felt it before it happened. That moment. That invisible line being drawn. No, she said immediately, stepping forward as one of the soldiers reached for the first child. They stay with me. No response. They need. A hand grabbed her arm. Not rough. Not gentle. Just firm enough to stop her. She twisted, trying to pull free. They stay with me, she repeated, louder now, her voice cracking despite everything she had done to keep it steady. The soldier didn't react. Didn't acknowledge. Didn't care. The first child was lifted. Carried away. The sound that came out of the group wasn't screaming. Not yet. It was worse. It was confusion. Miss Lena? That broke her. Not outwardly. Not visibly. But something inside her shifted. Sharpened. Focused. She stopped pulling. Stopped fighting. And instead, she moved. Deliberate. She stepped directly into the path of the next soldier, placing herself between it and the children behind her. They stay with me, she said again. This time quieter. Not pleading. Stating. For a moment, nothing happened. She hit the ground hard, the force knocking the breath from her lungs again as her vision blurred at the edges. The soldier stepped over her. Continued. The children started crying now. Louder. Breaking apart as they were separated, small hands reaching for each other, for her, for anything familiar. Lena forced herself up. Every movement hurt. Every breath burned. She staggered forward. Not to fight. To follow. Because she understood now. This was the only way she stayed with them. Not by stopping it. By refusing to leave. She moved with the group as they were herded down a long corridor, deeper into the structure. Cold walls. Dim lights. No windows. The children were placed into another room. Larger. But no better. The doors sealed behind them with a heavy final sound. And just like that, it was quiet again. Different this time. Heavier. Final. The children gathered around her immediately, instinct overriding everything else. Are they going to come back? Where are we? Miss Lena. She knelt down in the center of them, pulling as many as she could close again. Her arms weren't enough. But they were all she had. I'm here, she said. Always that. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't know if that was true. But she made it true anyway. That night, if it was night, she started the stories again. Not because they needed distraction. Because they needed something stronger than fear. Once upon a time, she whispered, her voice echoing softly in the metal room, there was a little fox who wanted to touch the sun. They leaned in, listened, held on. And somewhere between one sentence and the next, Lena made a decision. Not out loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet, unbreakable promise that settled deep into her bones. She couldn't stop what had happened. She couldn't fight what had taken them. But she could do this. She could keep them together. She could keep them alive. And she could wait. Because out there, beyond the cold walls, beyond the ships, beyond whatever had decided their lives didn't matter, someone would find out. And when they did, everything would change. General Kareth Vaughn did not believe in surprises. In 187 years of command, he had reduced war to something clean, predictable, measurable. Every campaign followed patterns. Every enemy broke in ways that could be calculated if you watched closely enough. Emotion complicated things. So he removed it. That was how you won. That was how you lasted. Which was why the word anomaly irritated him more than any battlefield report ever had. He stood in the command chamber of Citadel Vrax, hands clasped behind his back, watching lines of data scroll across a suspended field of light. Explain, he said without turning. His intelligence officer hesitated. That alone was unusual. All human diplomatic channels have gone silent, sir. Vaughn's gaze didn't shift. Clarify. No transmissions. No negotiations. No standard traffic. Their ambassadors have withdrawn. Trade routes have reversed. Civilian relays are active, but they are not carrying data. The pause. Since when? Approximately 18 hours. Vaughn turned then. Slowly. 18 hours, he repeated. Yes, sir. That was not panic behavior. That was not confusion. That was intent. Which operation intersects human territory within that time frame? The officer pulled up the records immediately. Only one, sir. A frontier raid on a minor colony. Designation, he glanced down, then back up. Haven Sector Outpost 7. Commander. Rectal. Vaughn nodded once. A routine name. A routine officer. A routine operation. Report. The data shifted. Population, minimal. Resistance, negligible. Outcome, successful. Captives acquired. Resources secured. No strategic significance. Vaughn read it all in seconds. Nothing stood out, which meant something was missing. Full manifest, he said. The officer hesitated again. Vaughn noticed. That was twice. The data appeared. Rows. Numbers. Classifications. Labor units. Standard. 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 His eyes moved across them quickly, then stopped. Not on what was written. On what wasn't. No age markers, he said. Correct, sir. Facility types? The officer swallowed. One educational structure. One juvenile housing unit. The room went very still. Vaughn didn't react immediately. He simply looked at the data again. Recalculated. Adjusted. And for the first time in decades, something didn't fit. Summon Counselor Ilian, he said. The officer blinked. Sir? Now. Ilian arrived within minutes. He moved differently than the others in the chamber. Slower. Careful. As if every step had already been considered before it was taken. He wasn't Vraxian. That alone made him useful. He had spent 40 years studying emerging species. 40 years watching how they thought, how they reacted, how they broke. Vaughn didn't respect him, but he listened when things stopped making sense. The humans have gone silent, Vaughn said. All of them. At once. Ilian's expression didn't change. May I see the report? Vaughn handed it over. He watched as the counselor read. Then again. Slower. His hands trembled slightly by the time he reached the end. That was new. What is it? Honest. Ilian didn't answer immediately. He looked up instead. And in his eyes, there was something Vaughn had not seen in a very long time. Not uncertainty. Not confusion. Fear. How many? Ilian asked quietly. 2014 captives. That is not what I asked. Vaughn paused. Then checked again. 317 classified from juvenile facilities. Ilian closed his eyes. For a long moment he said nothing. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Lower. Careful. General, do you understand what a human child is? Vaughn frowned slightly. A developing member of their species. No different from... No. The interruption was soft, but absolute. You're applying biological logic to something that is not biological. Silence spread across the chamber. Officers nearby had stopped moving, listening. Ilian stepped forward slightly, placing the data tablet down as if it might shatter if handled carelessly. Most species protect their young because they must, he said. Instinct. Survival. Continuation. He looked up. Humans choose to. Vaughn didn't respond. So Ilian continued. They have built it into themselves. Reinforced it. Taught it. Repeated it across generations until it became something more than instinct. The pause. Something absolute. Vaughn's eyes narrowed slightly. They are divided, he said. Fragmented. Politically unstable. Yes, Ilian replied. Until this. He tapped the tablet. Light flickered across the list of numbers. Until you give them a single point of agreement. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. What happens? Honest. Not dismissive. Not skeptical. Direct. Ilian held his gaze. They stopped being divided. The beat. Completely. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the systems in the chamber seemed quieter. Vaughn's mind moved through possibilities. Conflict. Retaliation. Negotiation. Escalation. They will respond, he said. Of course, Ilian replied. How? That was the question. The only one that mattered. Ilian's answer came without hesitation. With everything. A ripple passed through the room. Subtle, but real. Vaughn didn't look away. Define everything. Ilian took a breath. Their fleets. Their reserves. Their restricted weapons systems. Their black projects. Another pause. The things they agreed never to use again. Vaughn's posture shifted. Slightly. That would be inefficient. It would, Ilian agreed. If this were about efficiency. Silence again. Heavy now. Understanding beginning to form. They will negotiate, one of the officers said quickly. They always negotiate. Ilian shook his head. No. Every species. No, he repeated. Stronger this time. They will not. Vaughn's voice cut through the tension. Why? Ilian looked at him. Really looked. Asking that question means you still think this is a war, he said. A long pause. It isn't. The words settled slowly. Uncomfortably. What is it then? Honest. Ilian's voice dropped to almost a whisper. It's a retrieval. No one in the room spoke. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The silence. The timing. The missing data. Vaughn turned back to the display. To the numbers. To the line that should have meant nothing. 317. For clarity, he said, his voice controlled, precise. You are stating that this species will mobilize its entire military structure for juvenile units. Ilian didn't hesitate. Yes. Without negotiation. Yes. Without regard for cost. Yes. Vaughn's jaw tightened slightly. That is not strategy. No, Ilian said quietly. It isn't. A long silence followed. What is it? Ilian's answer was immediate. Resolve. The word landed harder than anything else he had said. Because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't dramatic. It was final. Vaughn stood there for a moment. Thinking. Calculating. Adjusting. And for the first time in 187 years, he reached a conclusion he did not like. Open a channel to Commander Rectal, he said. The officer moved instantly. The line connected within seconds. The commander's image appeared, confident, composed, unaware. General, Rectal said, I assume this is regarding the Haven operation. Successful extraction. Minimal. Return them. The words cut cleanly through the transmission. Rectal blinked. Sir? The juveniles, Vaughn said. All of them. Immediately. The pause. With respect, General, the captives have already been distributed across processing facilities. Reversing that would be inefficient. If the humans, they will come. Rectal frowned slightly. Then we will negotiate. Vaughn stared at him. For a long second. And in that second, something shifted. Cold. Certain. You do not understand what you have done, Vaughn said quietly. Rectal's expression hardened. I understand perfectly. We have leverage. The channel went silent. Not disconnected. Just quiet. Vaughn studied him, measured him, and came to a final conclusion. Not about the humans. About his own officer. Maintain your position, Vaughn said. Flat. Controlled. We will reassess. The channel closed. The room remained still. General, one of the officers asked. Vaughn didn't answer immediately. He was looking at the display again. At the map. At the space between his territory and theirs. Then he spoke. Begin fleet consolidation. A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Sir? Every available unit, he continued. Defensive formation. Full sector coverage. That scale of mobilization would suggest. It would suggest, Vaughn interrupted, that we are preparing for something we do not yet understand. Turned. Slow. Deliberate. And I do not intend to be unprepared when it arrives. The orders went out. Quietly. Efficiently. Across systems. Across fleets. Ships began to move. Positions shifted. Weapons systems activated. A wall began to form in the dark. Not out of fear. Out of calculation. But even as it happened, even as thousands of ships aligned into perfect defensive structure, one thing remained. Unanswered. Vaughn looked once more at the number on the display. 317. And for the first time in his long, calculated life, it didn't look small. The message reached human space at 312 standard. It was incomplete. Broken. Carried on a signal so degraded it should have been lost long before it crossed the distance between stars. Most of it was static. Fragments. Noise. But the core of it, the part that mattered, came through clearly. 3 words. They took children. The relay operator on duty listened to it twice. Not because she didn't understand. Because she did. And she needed to be sure. Her hands didn't shake when she forwarded it. They didn't need to. The system knew what to do. Within seconds, it moved up the chain. Within minutes, it reached military intelligence. Within the hour, it had been verified. Confirmed. Cross-referenced against the silence of Haven Sector Outpost 7. At 4:01, it reached the United Human Command. At 4:03, everything changed. There was no announcement. No speech. No broadcast explaining what was happening. There didn't need to be. At 4:05, every human diplomatic channel went dark. Not disrupted. Not attacked. Turned off. At 4:07, civilian traffic across long-range networks dropped by 80%. Not forced. Chosen. At 4:10, automated protocols, old ones, buried ones, began to activate. Systems that had not been used in decades. Systems most people didn't even know existed. At 4:15, a single phrase was transmitted across every secured military frequency. Final. They took our children. That was it. No orders attached. No instructions. None were needed. Because every person who heard it already knew what came next. Vice Admiral Elias Kane was in his office when the message arrived. He read it once. Then again. Then he set the tablet down carefully on his desk. He didn't speak. Didn't move. For a long moment he just sat there. Still. Completely still. His aide stepped forward. Sir? Kane didn't look up. Confirm. It's verified, the aide said quietly. Multiple sources. Colony is dark. No outgoing signals. The pause. Children confirmed among the captured. Silence stretched. Heavy. Controlled. Kane closed his eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Then opened them again. Something had changed. Not outwardly. Not visibly. But it was there. Activate recall, he said. The aide froze. Full recall, sir? Yes. That will. I know what it will do. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Do it. The aide moved. Because something in that tone made hesitation feel like a mistake. Within minutes, the first responses began. Retired officers reactivated their commissions. Reserve fleets spun up from cold storage. Shipyards halted civilian production mid-cycle and rerouted everything to military output. No one argued. No one asked for clarification. They just moved. Across human space, the same pattern repeated. On Earth, recruitment centers opened before sunrise. They didn't have to. People were already there. Waiting. Not shouting. Not demanding. Standing in silence. In line. On Mars, 3 competing shipbuilding corporations issued a joint statement within 40 minutes. All production now under UHC authority. No negotiations. No contracts. Just compliance. On the outer colonies, governors who had spent years locked in political deadlock signed unanimous defense mobilization orders without a single dissenting vote. Things got stranger. Criminal networks began transmitting data directly to military intelligence. Smuggling routes. Hidden corridors. Black market access points. Information they had spent decades protecting. They handed it over freely. No conditions. No payment. Because the line had been crossed. And everyone understood what that meant. The galaxy noticed. Of course it did. You couldn't hide something like this. Entire sectors shifting. Fleets moving. Communication going dark. It was impossible to miss. The Concorde reached out. No response. They tried again. Still nothing. Because humanity wasn't ignoring them. Humanity was busy. At 1900 hours standard, a Falari diplomatic envoy arrived at a UHC command station. They were granted an audience. Vice Admiral Kane received them personally. The envoy bowed slightly, voice calm and practiced. "We believe a peaceful resolution is still possible," they said. "The Vraxian Dominion has negotiated in the past. If channels are opened..." "There are no channels," Kane replied. "Polite. Neutral. Absolute." The pause. "Then we can help establish..." "No." The envoy hesitated. That wasn't part of the script. Kane folded his hands on the desk. "We are going to retrieve our children," he said. No emotion. No anger. Just fact. If the Dominion resists, they will be removed. The envoy blinked. Removed? Kane didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. Because in that moment, the envoy understood something instinctively. This wasn't escalation. This wasn't conflict. This was outcome. Predetermined. Already decided. They stood there for a second longer. Then bowed again. Lower this time. "We will inform the Concorde." Kane nodded once. That would be wise. The envoy left. And later, in a private message sent across secure channels, they wrote only one thing. "Do not interfere." 72 hours later, the first fleet arrived. Then the second. Then the third. They didn't come from one direction. They came from all of them. Jump points lit across the sector like stars being born all at once. Blue markers filled the tactical displays of every Vraxian command station watching the border. At first, it didn't make sense. The numbers were wrong. Too high. Too fast. "Confirm count," one officer said. "Rechecking." The pause. "Still rising." "How many?" Silence. "Over 9,000 capital-class vessels." The room went still. That number shouldn't exist. Not for one species. Not for one response. And they were still arriving. General Vaughn stood in the command chamber, watching it unfold. Line by line. Ship by ship. Formation by formation. No chaos. No overlap. Every movement precise. Deliberate. Controlled. "They're not forming attack lines," one officer said quietly. Vaughn didn't respond. He was already seeing it. "This isn't an invasion," another added. "No," Vaughn said. Now he spoke. "They aren't here to take anything." The realization settled like weight. Heavy. Final. They're here to remove it. A transmission came through. Broadband. All frequencies. All languages. It played once. Then again. And again. "Return our children. You have one solar cycle. No threats. No elaboration. Just time." Vaughn watched the countdown begin. Around him, his officers moved faster now. Adjusting positions. Reinforcing lines. Preparing for impact. But something was wrong. He could feel it. This wasn't how war started. There was no probing. No testing. No escalation curve. Just a line drawn. And a clock ticking down beside it. "General," one of his officers said, "Commander Rectal is requesting guidance." Vaughn didn't look away from the display. "Patch him through." The commander appeared. Confident. Unchanged. "They're bluffing," Rectal said immediately. "They want their assets back. We can negotiate. Return them." Fin. Same words. Same tone. Rectal's expression tightened. "With respect, General, we are in a position of strength. If they want the children, they will have to." "You are out of time." Silence. Rectal frowned. "The cycle hasn't." "It doesn't matter," Vaughn said. And for the first time, there was something in his voice. Not fear. Something colder. "They are not waiting to decide," he said. "They are waiting to act." The channel went quiet. Rectal didn't respond. Didn't understand. Vaughn knew he wouldn't. So he ended the transmission. And turned back to the display. The timer continued. Slow. Steady. Unstoppable. When it reached 0, the blue markers moved. All of them. At once. No hesitation. No signal. No command delay. Just motion. Perfect. Final. Vaughn watched as his defensive line, carefully constructed, strategically sound, mathematically precise, began to come apart. Not shattered. Not overwhelmed. Dismantled. Because this wasn't an attack. It was a path being cleared. And nothing in the galaxy was going to stand in it. The facility on Corn 4 had never been designed for silence. It was built for processing, movement, throughput, efficiency. For now, it was quiet. Not empty. Never empty. 317 children breathed in that cold metal space, huddled together in the center of a room too large and too bare to feel real. Lena stood among them. She always stood. Even when her legs shook. Even when her vision blurred at the edges from exhaustion. She stood. Because if she sat, if she let herself stop, she wasn't sure she'd be able to start again. "All right," she said softly, clapping her hands once. "Morning check." The children stirred. Slowly. Sleep hadn't been kind to them. But they moved. Because she asked them to. Because routine was the only thing holding the pieces together. "Positions," she added gently. They knew what that meant now. They had built it together. The older ones shifted first, taking their places without being told twice. Near the walls. Near the door. Near the smallest children who still woke up crying and didn't understand why. The boy she had chosen to count stepped forward. He still didn't talk much. But he counted. Every day. Every time. He moved through the group carefully, touching each shoulder as he went. 1, 2, 3. Lena watched him. Not because she didn't trust him. Because she needed to hear it. 316, 317. He stopped. Looked up. Nodded. "All here." Lena exhaled slowly. "Good," she said. "We're still winning." A few of them smiled at that. Fragile. But real. That mattered. It had to matter. "Breakfast next," she said. "Then stories." That got a stronger reaction. A few more smiles. A few quiet whispers. Because the stories hadn't stopped. Not once. Not in 8 days. 8 days of cold floors and metal walls and guards who didn't understand what they were guarding. 8 days of turning fear into something else. Something manageable. Something they could survive. Lena moved through them, adjusting, checking, fixing what she could. A scraped knee. A torn sleeve. A child who hadn't eaten enough the day before. She couldn't fix everything. But she fixed what she could. And she kept going. Because that was the job now. Not teaching. Not protecting. Holding. Holding until something changed. It started as a vibration. Different. Lena felt it through the floor before she heard anything. Her head lifted slightly. The children noticed too. They always did. "What was that?" someone whispered. She didn't answer. She was listening. Another vibration. Stronger this time. A sound. Chirp. Cracking. Like something massive breaking open. The children froze. The older ones moved closer to the center without being told. They had learned. Stay together. Stay close. Another impact. Closer. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin gray lines. A few of the younger ones started crying. "It's okay," Lena said immediately, stepping forward. Middle of the room. "Just like we practiced." They moved. Fast. Not panicked. Focused. Because she was. Another sound. Not outside this time. Inside. Somewhere in the walls. Something cutting. Something forcing its way through. Silence. A long, heavy silence. The kind that comes right before something changes forever. And then, a voice. Human. Facility secure. Advancing to holding area. Lena's breath caught. She didn't move. Didn't speak. Because if she did, if she let herself believe it too early, it would break her. The wall lit up. Not all of it. Just a line. A thin, perfect line of white that traced a rectangle into the metal like it wasn't there at all. The children stared. No one spoke. The line finished. And the entire section of wall fell inward. Light flooded the room. Real light. Not the dim artificial strip they had lived under. Bright. Blinding. Figures stood beyond it. Different. Not like the others. Their armor was dark, but it was shaped for them. Human. They moved fast. But carefully. Weapons down. Always down. The first one through the opening stopped. Just for a second. Just long enough to see them. All of them. 317. Thin. Waiting. He removed his helmet. Tired. A scar across his jaw. His eyes moved across the room. And something in his face broke. Not control. Not discipline. Something deeper. Something human. "My name is Sergeant Hale," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "We're here to take you home." No one moved. Not yet. Because after everything, after 8 days of nothing, hope didn't come easy. A small girl stepped forward. Slowly. Carefully. She looked up at him. "Miss Lena said you would come." The room held its breath. The soldier knelt down in front of her. His hands trembled. Just slightly. "Miss Lena was right," he said. That was it. That was all it took. The room broke. Children moved. Not running. Not screaming. Just moving. Toward them. Hands reaching. Voices shaking. Some crying. Some laughing. Some doing both at the same time. The soldiers didn't hold formation anymore. They knelt. They reached back. They picked them up like they mattered. Like they had always mattered. Because they did. Because they always had. Lena didn't move. Not at first. She stood where she was, watching it happen. Making sure. Counting without thinking. Watching every face. Every movement. Making sure no one was missed. A medic approached her slowly. "Ma'am," he said gently. "Are you injured?" She shook her head. "Count them," she said. Her voice cracked. "Please." The medic hesitated for half a second. Then nodded. It took time. Because the children were everywhere now. Moving. Clinging. Alive. But eventually, he came back. "All accounted for," he said. 317. Lena sat down. Right there. On the cold metal floor. And for the first time since the sky turned orange, she let go. Commander Rectal was found in a storage compartment. He didn't fight. Didn't argue. Didn't understand. Not really. Because even then, even watching it collapse around him, he still thought this had been a war. General Vaughn stood in silence as the reports came in. Facility 1, secured. Facility 2, secured. Facility 3, recovered, the officer said quietly. Vaughn closed his eyes. Just once. Because now it was complete. Not their defeat. That had happened days ago. This was simply the moment it became visible. The human fleet didn't advance further. Didn't press deeper. Didn't retaliate beyond what was necessary. They stopped. Exactly where they needed to. Because they had not come for conquest. They had come for something else. And now, they had it. Months later, the records would show everything. The mobilization. The battle. The scale of force. The speed of response. Historians would study it. Admirals would analyze it. Governments would fear it. But none of that would matter as much as the single line added to the Concord's official doctrine. It was short, simple, and absolute. Do not touch human children. Lena returned to her classroom. New walls. New windows. Same sunlight. The children sat in front of her again. Not all of them, but enough. More than enough. She held the book in her hands. The same one. Edges softened by time. She opened it. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a little fox who wanted to touch the sun." Outside, high above the world, silent ships watched from orbit. Not as conquerors. Not as guardians. Something else. Something quieter. Something permanent. Lena didn't look up. She didn't need to. She already knew. They had come. And if they ever had to, they would come again.